Have you ever felt like a plant opened your mind wider than years of meditation ever could? Or maybe you've felt the opposite, like something that once helped you connect, now feels like a barrier between you and your soul. This video is not here to tell you that cannabis is good or bad. It's here to explore something far more sacred and far more uncomfortable. Because here's the truth. Cannabis is a teacher. But not all students listen, and not all lessons elevate you. In the spiritual world, cannabis is both glorified and demonized. Some call it medicine, a sacred doorway, the green ally that unlocks higher dimensions. Others call it a crutch, a distraction, a trap disguised as liberation. So which is it? That's the question most people never dare to truly ask, because most people don't want the real answer. You see, we live in a time where altered states are confused with awakening, where feeling high is mistaken for being conscious, and where escape wears the mask of spirituality. But let me ask you something real. If you need a substance to feel spiritual, is that true freedom? If your clarity depends on smoke, are you really seeing clearly? And if the silence of your soul can't be reached without external help, are you actually hearing your soul? Or just the echo of your craving? This is not judgment. This is reflection. Because for many, maybe even you, cannabis began as a portal. It cracked open your perception, softened your armor, whispered truths you weren't ready to hear from anyone else, and for that you're grateful. But over time, something shifted. The insights became fuzzy. The rituals became habits. The expansion turned into avoidance. And now, what once felt sacred feels stuck. So this video is a journey back to the roots of this plant and to the roots of your own consciousness. We're going to explore the spiritual history of cannabis, how it interacts with your energetic body, the difference between sacred use and spiritual bypassing, and most importantly, how to know if it's guiding you toward your higher self or gently keeping you asleep. This won't be a surface-level talk, because you didn't come here for opinions. You came here for truth, for clarity, for sovereignty, and maybe, just maybe, to finally reclaim the parts of your path that no substance, no matter how sacred, can walk for you. So stay with me. What you're about to hear might validate what you've always felt, or it might challenge everything you believe. Either way, it could change the way you see your own spiritual path. Forever. Let's begin. Before it became a controversy, before it became a market, before it became a lifestyle, cannabis was a prayer. For thousands of years, this plant wasn't just smoked, inhaled, or consumed. It was invited, honored, approached like a living being, a plant spirit. Something ancient cultures understood in ways modern society often forgets. To them, cannabis wasn't an escape. It was a bridge between the visible and invisible, between the human and the divine. In the ancient Vedic texts of India, cannabis is mentioned as one of the 5 sacred plants. It was considered a gift from the gods, particularly linked to Lord Shiva, the deity who represents destruction of illusion and rebirth into truth. Sadhus, holy ascetics who dedicate their lives to spiritual liberation, still use cannabis, in its drink form called bhang, as part of their rituals. But it's not taken casually. It's not for pleasure. It's to pierce through the veil, to silence the ego, to touch the eternal for a moment. In those ceremonies, the plant becomes more than matter. It becomes a frequency, a doorway. When taken with reverence, in silence, or in mantra, the effect is not just chemical, it's energetic. The mind may slow, but awareness sharpens. The heart softens. The self dissolves. In that sacred space, many seekers report feeling their body as light, their thoughts as whispers, their presence as vast. This is not a high. This is a return. In other parts of the world, cannabis held similar status. Among Rastafarians, cannabis, or ganja, is considered a sacrament, They gather, not to get intoxicated, but to reason, to speak truths, to connect with Jah, the divine presence that lives in all things. It's not entertainment. It's communion, a spiritual practice. And in that space, cannabis becomes what it was always meant to be, a lens to see more clearly, not to blur what is. Even further back, archaeological digs in Central Asia have revealed cannabis residue in ancient fire altars dating back over 2,000 years. It was used in funerary rites and spiritual ceremonies. Some believe early shamans used it to cross dimensions, speak with the spirits, or journey into the soul of the sick to retrieve healing. These weren't festivals. These were spiritual missions. The plant was a tool, but the transformation came from the courage to look within. Because here's something that's often forgotten in the modern conversation. Cannabis has a spirit. And like any spirit, it responds to the energy you bring. If you approach it with haste, it will reflect back your restlessness. If you come with addiction, it will show you your avoidance. But if you come with presence, with humility, with clear intention, something else happens. The plant begins to whisper, not in words, but in sensations. You may feel your breath deepen, your thoughts slow. But underneath the stillness, something stirs. An emotion, a memory, a truth you've been avoiding. For some, cannabis is the first time they feel safe enough to cry, to sit with themselves, to not run. And while that's beautiful, it's also delicate, because that sensitivity, that openness, can be misused too. Many people report that their first experiences with cannabis brought deep insight. They felt connected, alive, touched by something greater. But over time, if used unconsciously, that window starts to close. The visions fade, the connection dulls, and what remains is just routine, habit, even stagnation. Why? Because the spirit of the plant doesn't force itself on you. It invites you in. But if you stop showing up fully, it steps back. That's the spiritual principle at play. Intention shapes reality. And cannabis, like any other tool, bends to the energy of your intention. Think of it like a mirror. If you approach it seeking truth, it will reveal. But if you approach it seeking numbness, it may oblige. But you'll be hiding from the very medicine you once called sacred. To feel the real power of this plant, you have to meet it halfway. Light a candle. Breathe slowly. Hold the plant in your hands. Speak to it. Thank it. Ask it what it wants to show you. And then, listen. Not with your ears, but with your presence. With your breath. With your inner body. That's when the sacred returns. Because cannabis, when used with reverence, can help dissolve the hardened walls of the ego. It can help you feel your body from the inside. Sense your energy field. Notice patterns of thought and emotion that normally move too fast to catch, but only if you slow down enough to receive. Only if you're willing to be honest about why you're using it. So the question is not whether cannabis is good or bad. That's too simple. The deeper question is, what energy are you bringing into the relationship with this plant? Are you seeking truth? Or are you seeking escape? Are you entering sacred space? Or just trying to feel less? Because the answer to that question will shape the answers you receive. And perhaps most importantly, what if the plant no longer wants to be your teacher? What if it brought you to the door, but now it's time to walk through without it? But that's something we'll only begin to understand as we look at what cannabis actually does to consciousness. Not just the body, not just the mind, but the soul's perception itself. And that's where we're headed next. Cannabis doesn't create anything that isn't already inside you. What it does is amplify what's there. Think of it like a magnifying glass. It enlarges the subtle, the hidden, the suppressed. That's why one person can take it and feel euphoric, while another feels anxious or afraid. It doesn't invent new states. It simply turns up the volume on whatever's already playing beneath the surface. This is one of the most misunderstood truths about the plant. People chase the good high, thinking it's about getting the strain, the dosage, or the ritual just right. But in truth, the experience reveals your own energetic state. If your inner world is noisy, cannabis might make it louder. If you're grounded and open, it may deepen your awareness. It's not about the plant, it's about the soil it lands in, your consciousness. That's why cannabis can be a profound tool on the spiritual path, but only for those willing to look inward. When approached with intention, it can slow the analytical mind, soften resistance, and allow a person to feel emotions they've numbed for years. It can loosen the grip of mental loops and invite the body back into the conversation. Suddenly, you're not just thinking about your pain, you're feeling it, breathing with it, learning from it. And in that vulnerable space, insight becomes possible. For example, a woman once shared that she'd used cannabis during a personal retreat. No distractions, no music, just silence, journaling, and stillness. She said the plant didn't take her away from her thoughts. It brought her deeper into them. Childhood memories surfaced. A repetitive fear revealed its origin. She cried, she laughed, and by the end, she said, "I met myself in a way I didn't know I'd been avoiding." That's the power of amplification, not distortion, but revelation. But amplification is a double-edged blade. If you're feeling disconnected, the plant may intensify your longing. If you're suppressing anger, it might bring it to the surface. If your nervous system is already overwhelmed, cannabis may heighten that overwhelm. That's not the plant betraying you. That's the plant showing you what needs attention. It holds a mirror, not always gentle, not always comfortable, but always honest. On an energetic level, cannabis interacts with your subtle body. It can open the heart, expand awareness through the third eye, and relax tension stored along the spine. But it can also unground you if you're not anchored. That's why spiritual teachers often emphasize practices like breathwork, mantra, or stillness alongside cannabis use, not to add rules, but to stabilize the space. The deeper you go, the more sacred structure you need. Think of it like this. You wouldn't take a powerful hallucinogen and walk into a shopping mall. The same logic applies. If cannabis is amplifying your consciousness, then the container becomes vital. The music you play, the thoughts you think, the energy of the room, even the people you're with, it all gets amplified. That's why intentional use matters. You're not just getting high. You're stepping into an altered field. And everything in that field becomes louder, brighter, more intense, including you. If you've ever felt paranoid or scattered after using cannabis, it might be because your body was unprepared to hold the surge of perception it unlocked. Amplified consciousness requires nervous system capacity. That's why sometimes silence and slowness are more powerful than stimulation. Cannabis can help you hear your soul, but only if you stop trying to drown it out with external noise. So if you're going to amplify, be ready to listen. There's also a hidden layer. Cannabis doesn't just amplify your conscious thoughts. It often amplifies the unconscious too. That means suppressed memories, stored grief, ancestral wounds, spiritual insights. All of it can come rushing to the surface, and if you're not prepared, it can feel overwhelming. That's why this plant should be treated with the same care you'd give to a sacred ceremony. Because that's what it is. So the question is, if cannabis is turning up the volume of your consciousness, what station are you tuned into? What energy are you feeding before you enter that space? Because once you open that portal, you're not just magnifying the light, you're magnifying the shadow too. And shadow work, well, that's where this path begins to ask much more of you. One of the most seductive illusions on the spiritual path is the idea that just because something feels expansive, it must be good for you. But not everything that opens you is helping you evolve. Some things simply open you up, then leave. You scattered, vulnerable, and even further from yourself than before. And this is where many seekers unknowingly fall into the trap of false spirituality, especially when it comes to cannabis. Cannabis can make the ordinary feel extraordinary. A simple thought can seem like a revelation. A familiar song feels sacred. You stare at a tree and suddenly feel one with nature. And yes, sometimes those moments are real. Sometimes they crack your heart open and you touch something timeless. But here's the question no one wants to ask. What happens after the high fades? Does the insight remain? Does your behavior change? Do you treat people differently? Do you wake up the next day more connected to your soul? Or just chasing the next time you can feel that way again? Because the difference between a real awakening and a temporary sensation is integration. This is where cannabis becomes slippery. It feels spiritual. It feels like you're evolving. But feelings are not always truth. Just because something makes you cry or feel connected doesn't mean it's moving you forward. A lot of people get stuck in what looks like spirituality, but is actually just emotional stimulation. Or worse, spiritual bypassing dressed up in sacred language. You may know someone like this. They talk about energy, consciousness, awakening. They have incense burning, wear crystals, follow full moon rituals. But underneath they're avoiding grief, avoiding action, avoiding responsibility. Cannabis in this case doesn't liberate. It soothes the pain of not growing. It becomes a way to feel spiritual without doing the deeper inner work that true transformation requires. And the plant? It will go along with it for a while. It's generous like that. It opens doors. It waits. It gently shows you the path. But if you keep using it to feel something instead of become something, it stops revealing the deeper layers. It becomes quiet. The sacred becomes dulled. And you may start to notice that you're just repeating yourself. Same thoughts, same habits, same dreams. Just in a softer haze. There's a hidden cost to that kind of false spirituality. It feels good, but it stagnates your evolution. It disconnects you from your real power, the kind that only comes through clarity, commitment, and truth. Not every insight is meant to be felt. Some are meant to be lived. Some are meant to be hard. Some are meant to break you open and rebuild. You sober, present, and raw. So how do you know if you've fallen into this trap? Ask yourself this. Are you using cannabis to connect deeper with life, or to protect yourself from feeling it fully? Are you more loving, more awake, more aligned in your relationships? Or are you floating just above the discomfort, just high enough to not have to face it? The spiritual path asks for realness, not performances, not aesthetics, not just moments of bliss, but months of shadow work, confusion, realignment, humility. Cannabis can be a companion in that journey, or a clever detour. And most people won't know which one they're on until the silence becomes louder than the sensation. And the truth is, it's easier to feel like you're awakening than it is to actually awaken. Because actual awakening costs something. It costs identity, illusions, control, and sometimes, even the things that once felt sacred must be released. But before we talk about letting go, we need to understand how cannabis affects the very system that guides your spiritual growth, your energetic body. Every spiritual tradition speaks of an unseen body, not made of flesh and bone, but of vibration, frequency, and light. Some call it the aura. Others speak of meridians, nadis, or the energy field. And at the core of many systems lies the chakra system, spinning vortices of energy that regulate your connection between the physical and the spiritual. When you engage with cannabis, you're not just influencing your nervous system, you're shifting this energetic architecture as well. Cannabis interacts most noticeably with the heart and third eye chakras. That's why so many people feel more emotional, more connected, more introspective when using it. The heart opens, sometimes gently, sometimes forcefully, allowing buried emotions to rise. The third eye becomes more active, leading to heightened intuition, creativity, and visionary experiences. But this amplification isn't always smooth. If those centers are blocked or unstable, cannabis can overstimulate them, leading to overwhelm, confusion, or emotional flooding. Energetically, cannabis tends to lift the awareness upward. It pulls the center of consciousness away from the lower chakras, survival, grounding, embodiment, and into the higher centers of perception and feeling. This is why people often report feeling floaty or spaced out after prolonged use. They're literally ungrounded, present in the upper realms, but disconnected from their roots, from the earth, from their physical instincts. And this disconnection, while it may feel light or even euphoric at first, can become dangerous over time. You see, spiritual growth doesn't happen only in the sky. It happens in the soil of your being, in your body, in your ability to stay rooted and open at the same time. When cannabis is used frequently without grounding practices, the energetic body can begin to fragment. Thoughts become scattered, emotions stay unprocessed, the body is ignored, and the soul waits. Because the soul incarnated here for wholeness, not for constant escape into the clouds. That's why many traditional plant medicine ceremonies begin with grounding rituals, drumming, breathwork, food, movement. These aren't just cultural details, they're energetic necessities. They keep the lower chakras online so that the higher chakras can open safely. Without that balance, the plant may open you too fast, too wide, and without enough capacity to integrate what you see. Some people who use cannabis long-term without awareness start to feel energetically leaky. They can't focus. They forget simple things. They feel anxious in crowds or overly sensitive to other people's emotions. These aren't just side effects. They're signs that the energetic body is out of alignment. Cannabis has loosened the structure, but nothing has come in to rebuild it. It's like opening the windows of your house to let in fresh air, but never closing them. Eventually, the wind starts to scatter everything. So how do you work with cannabis in a way that supports your energetic health? You start by anchoring your awareness in the body before you take it in. Feel your feet on the ground. Place one hand on your belly, one on your chest. Breathe. Speak your intention out loud. Keep stillness in the room. After you use it, move slowly. Listen inward. Journal. Meditate. Let your awareness travel through your chakras. Is there tightness in the root? Heat in the solar plexus? A spinning sensation in the crown? Learn to read your energetic state like a map. Over time, the plant becomes not the guide, but the lens that helps you see your own energy more clearly. And if the plant begins to show you that something is off, dizziness, discomfort, disassociation, don't dismiss it. That's feedback, not punishment. Sometimes the plant is saying, slow down, ground deeper, come home to your body before you try to leave it again. And when you listen, something shifts. You begin to cultivate spiritual maturity, not just spiritual experience. Because true awakening isn't just light pouring down from above, it's light rising from within. And that light needs a strong vessel to move through. A clear, stable, energetic body that can hold the full range of what you are. Cannabis can open the channels, but only your presence can keep them open. And that brings us to the deeper question. What makes the difference between sacred use and unconscious habit? There's a moment, subtle, quiet, that happens before any spiritual act. It happens before the breath, before the words, before the incense is lit or the eyes are closed. That moment is intention, and it changes everything. The same plant can be medicine or a mask. The same smoke can be prayer or a pattern. The difference lies in what you bring into the moment before you inhale. Intention is not just a thought, it's a vibration, a frequency you emit into the unseen. And the universe, including plant spirits, always responds to that signal. When you approach cannabis with no awareness, it becomes routine. You light it up automatically, after work, before sleep, during stress. The lighter flicks, the inhale happens, and you disappear into the pattern. You're not connecting, you're coping, not creating sacred space, but soothing discomfort. This is the path of habit. It doesn't begin as harm, it begins as unconsciousness. But ritual. Ritual is a return to reverence. It's when the act of lighting the plant becomes a doorway. You clear the space, you breathe with presence. Maybe you sit in silence for a few minutes before taking anything in. You might even speak to the plant, aloud or internally, and ask, "What do you want me to see?" And in that single act, the space transforms. You're no longer consuming, you're communing. Ancient traditions understood this. They didn't approach sacred plants casually. In many cultures, people would fast before ceremony, bathe in cold water, sit in stillness, clean the physical space to prepare the inner space, because they knew the plant is not here to entertain you, it's here to meet you, and it will only go as deep as you're willing to go. Energetically, intention opens the gateway between levels of consciousness. When you sit down with clarity and speak your purpose, whether it's healing, insight, release, gratitude, or simply presence, the energetic field aligns. Your body, breath, and awareness harmonize. You become receptive. What happens next is no longer accidental. The experience begins to guide you, not just pass through you, but when you bypass intention, you invite confusion. You're walking into a sacred temple with muddy feet, distracted thoughts, and no idea why you came. And that's what most people do when they turn cannabis into habit. The temple becomes a couch. The silence becomes background noise. The sacred becomes the everyday. Not because the plant stopped working, but because the reverence disappeared. Let's make this practical. Try this. The next time you feel called to use cannabis, stop for a moment. Don't reach for the lighter yet. Sit, close your eyes, place one hand on your chest, take 3 deep breaths, then ask yourself, why now? Listen to the answer, even if it's uncomfortable. Is it for expansion, avoidance, relaxation, curiosity, fear? Honesty in that moment is the first act of sacredness. Then, light a candle. Say a few words. They don't have to be fancy, just true. Something like, I enter this space with love and respect. I ask to see what I need to see. I'm open to learning, healing, and being fully present. Speak it into the field. Speak it into the plant. Even if no one else hears it, your soul does. And the plant does too. When you treat the experience as a ritual, the entire session changes. You may cry, you may see visions, you may laugh from the belly like a child, or you may feel nothing except the honesty of your breath. But the difference is, you've returned to relationship. You're not just using a substance, you're entering a dialogue. That's the ancient way. That's the spiritual way. And in that space, something extraordinary begins to unfold. You become more powerful than the plant. Not in dominance, but in alignment. You no longer need the plant to feel connected. You bring the connection with you. And sometimes, that realization alone is enough to begin walking without it. But before we talk about walking away, we need to understand how cannabis interacts not just with your rituals, but with your vibration. Because energy is always in relationship, and some energies that don't match forever. Everything in existence is vibration. Your thoughts, your emotions, your breath, all frequencies moving through invisible fields. And plants, too, have frequencies. Just like music, each plant carries its own melody, its own medicine. Some are grounding. Some are expansive, some are protective, some are activating. And like music, not every plant plays in harmony with every soul. Cannabis has a distinct frequency, one that resonates deeply with the emotional and psychic layers of the human being. It moves slowly, sensually. It expands the field of perception, thins the veil between realms, and brings hidden truths to the surface. But like any vibrational being, cannabis doesn't operate in a vacuum. It interacts with the frequency you bring. And if your frequency and the plant's frequency are out of sync, the experience can become distorted. You've probably felt this before. There are days when cannabis makes you feel open, creative, soft, even blissful. And then there are days, maybe without warning, where the same plant brings anxiety, restlessness, or a fog that you can't quite shake. It's not the strain, it's not the dosage, it's not even your body chemistry. It's the vibrational mismatch between who you are in that moment and what the plant amplifies. Cannabis doesn't judge you, but it does reveal you. If you're holding grief, it may pull it to the surface. If you're ungrounded, it may scatter you further. If you're craving clarity but running from stillness, it may place you face to face with your own resistance. These moments aren't flaws in the plant. They're feedback from the energetic field. The plant is saying you're not ready to go up until you're willing to go down. In some spiritual traditions, this idea is understood intuitively. Medicine people speak of being called by a plant, not deciding to use it, but being invited. The frequency of the plant seeks resonance with the frequency of the person. If there's harmony, the experience opens. If there's dissonance, the plant may step back, or deliver a lesson in discomfort, not as punishment, but as guidance. And this brings us to something rarely spoken of: vibrational evolution. As you grow, your frequency shifts. Your needs change. Your tools transform. A plant that once matched your soul perfectly may no longer feel aligned, the same way some relationships once felt magical and now feel heavy. It's not that you or the plant is wrong. It's that the contract may have served its purpose. You are not static. You are a symphony in motion. And cannabis, like all sacred allies, comes into your life to play a certain chord, to open a certain doorway. But when you cling to that chord, even after its resonance has passed, the harmony turns to dissonance. That's when people begin to feel off with cannabis. Less clear, less connected, more dependent. It's not failure. It's evolution asking to be honored. So how do you know if you're still in vibrational harmony with the plant? Start by paying attention to how you feel after, not just during the experience, but in the hours and days that follow. Are you more present, more in love with life, more in tune with your body and relationships? Or do you feel slower, duller, distracted? Do you feel empowered, or subtly drained? Also observe your craving. Are you being called to sit with the plant in ceremony, or are you reaching for it reflexively, without pause or purpose? The first is alignment. The second is inertia. One comes from the soul, the other from the nervous system looking for relief. When you're in harmony with a sacred plant, you don't need it every day. The connection is deep enough that even one session can echo for weeks. The insights stay alive. The energy lingers. You feel full, not because the plant gave you something, but because it reminded you of what was already there. But when you're out of sync, the sessions feel shorter, shallower, less potent. You come back again and again, hoping for something that never quite lands. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is pause. To step back from the tool you once cherished and ask if your frequency has changed. To listen to the silence between the songs. To trust that a relationship once sacred can evolve, and that your soul will lead you to the next vibration when it's ready. But this leads to a deeper mystery. If the plant once amplified your vision and now no longer calls to you, what do you do with the space it leaves behind? And that, dear one, brings us to a different kind of silence. The silence of letting go. There comes a point on the spiritual path when the question is no longer, what can I take to feel more? But rather, what can I remove to hear what's already speaking? The soul doesn't shout. It doesn't beg. It whispers. And in a world addicted to noise, both outside and inside, that whisper is easy to miss. Cannabis for many begins as a way to quiet the noise, but over time, it can become its own kind of stimulation. A different flavor of distraction. One that feels sacred, but still pulls your awareness outward instead of inward. In the beginning, cannabis softens the mind. You breathe deeper. Time slows. You see beauty where you didn't before. And in that quieting, the soul gets a chance to rise. But if you return to the plant too often, too casually, too compulsively, the very thing that once created space can begin to fill it. The sacred silence is now occupied by sensation, by waves of feeling, internal movies, looping thoughts, or ambient fog. It's not silence, it's just a different kind of noise. This is the paradox of spiritual stimulation. We chase feeling because it makes us believe we're connected, but feeling is not the same as being. You can feel deeply and still be disconnected from your truth. You can be high and still avoid your soul. And the soul, wise, eternal, patient, waits for you on the other side of stimulation. You might not notice it at first. The sessions still feel beautiful. Your thoughts are interesting. Music is divine. But underneath it all, a subtle discomfort grows. You sense that something is off, but can't name it. You start needing the plant more often to access states that used to come naturally. And eventually you realize you're not hearing your soul. You're hearing your response to the plant. And that's the difference between silence and stillness. True stillness is not empty. It's full of presence. It's where you feel the pulse of your own being, the rhythm of your breath, the slight ache in your heart that leads you back to your purpose. It doesn't require enhancement. It requires removal of habits, of stimulation, of the need to constantly feel something. Try this. Take one evening and sit in complete silence. No cannabis, no music, no phone. Just a candle, your breath, and a willingness to be with whatever arises. Watch your mind try to escape. Feel the itch of distraction. Observe the emotions that surface when you remove the layer of smoke. And listen. Not with your ears, but with your awareness. Something ancient will start to speak. That voice, the one underneath everything and is always there. It doesn't need cannabis to appear. But sometimes, we use cannabis because we're afraid of what that voice might say. Because silence doesn't offer instant pleasure. It offers truth. And truth often asks for change. The deepest spiritual realizations rarely come in altered states. They come in the quiet moments, washing dishes, walking barefoot on the earth, lying in bed before sleep. When your mind is still and your heart is open enough to receive the message you've been running from. Cannabis can be a beautiful companion on this journey. But when it becomes the only doorway to presence, it slowly replaces the very presence it once revealed. So the question becomes, can you sit with yourself, raw and unfiltered? Can you meet your soul without smoke between you and its voice? And if you can't, is it really your soul you're hearing? Or just the echo of something you once needed but no longer do? That space, the silence beneath the craving, holds a different kind of intelligence. One that doesn't speak in visions or highs or revelations. One that simply waits for you to arrive, as you are. But before you can fully arrive, you have to explore the roots of your own relationship with cannabis. Not just how you use it, but why. There is a kind of sobriety that has nothing to do with rules or morality or judgment. It's not about being clean or pure in the eyes of the world. It's about being present, fully, courageously, relentlessly present with everything that lives inside you. Spiritual sobriety is not the absence of substances. It's the presence of you, unfiltered, unnumbed, undistracted. It's when you choose to walk through the fire of awareness, instead of softening the edges with smoke. Cannabis, like any spiritual ally, can be a gentle bridge to presence. At first, it can open doors that have been locked for years. It can soften trauma, reveal truth, even help the body release what it was never allowed to feel. But eventually, the path asks you to walk without the bridge, not because the bridge was wrong, but because you're ready to trust your own feet. And that's where the real work begins. Because presence isn't always pleasant. Sometimes it's rage. Sometimes it's grief. Sometimes it's the aching loneliness you've carried since childhood. And when those parts come forward, it's tempting to reach for something, anything, to take the edge off. But spiritual sobriety invites you to stay, to breathe through the discomfort, to hold yourself trembling instead of outsourcing your stability. And in that moment, something miraculous begins to happen. You start to remember that you are the medicine, not the plant, not the substance, not the ritual. You are the portal through which awareness flows. You are the temple, the altar, the fire and the offering. And when you meet yourself in that raw space, when without enhancements, without crutches, you don't just touch your soul, you become it. You realize that nothing was ever missing. The silence was never empty. You just hadn't stayed long enough to hear its song. This isn't a call for abstinence, it's a call for alignment, to know when the plant is serving you and when it's slowly replacing your own inner compass. Because there's a difference between support and dependency, between communion and escape. If cannabis is still helping you return to presence, then honor that. But if you notice that you're avoiding presence unless you're high, then maybe the soul is asking for something deeper, not more, but less. Not louder, but clearer. The truth is, presence doesn't need enhancement. It needs your attention. And often the most sacred form of attention is your willingness to sit, eyes open, heart soft, breath steady, with whatever is here now. Because what's here now is your path. And the more you walk it with your full awareness, the less you need anything to carry you through it. But for those who do choose to pause, who feel the pull to take space from cannabis, not as rejection but as a return, there's a deeper wisdom waiting, and it lives in the pause itself. There is a moment on every spiritual path when the soul calls for silence, not just of sound but of stimulation. A moment when all the tools, rituals, and allies that once brought clarity begin to feel distant, not wrong, just done. And in that moment, the path whispers a new invitation. Pause, not to punish, not to prove anything, but to purify. Sacred abstinence isn't about denying the plant. It's about listening for what lives beneath it. It's the decision to enter the temple of your life without any intermediary. No sacred smoke, no spiritual crutch, just breath, just awareness, just you, naked in the presence of what is. When you take a conscious break from cannabis, something unexpected begins to surface. The colors of life start to shift. The cravings get louder at first, but then soften. The dreams return. The body speaks again. Your intuition, once muffled by layers of fog, grows sharp, clear, direct. You start to realize that clarity was never gone, only covered. In this pause, the nervous system recalibrates. The aura thickens. The lower chakras ground. The body becomes more alert, more precise. You may feel more emotion, yes, and that's the point. The numbness starts to melt. The fog lifts, and you begin to feel your true baseline again. Not who you are with the plant, but who you are beneath it. Many people resist this pause because they're afraid of what they'll find. The boredom, the restlessness, the sadness that creeps in once the euphoria is gone. But these are not enemies. They are messengers. Each one carries the very key you've been seeking through altered states, the key to deeper integration. Sacred abstinence is not forever. It doesn't have to be a vow of renunciation. It can be a gesture of reverence. Like lovers who spend time apart, not because the love is gone, but because space makes the next meeting more honest, more whole, more free. And in that space, the soul has room to speak again, not through visions or waves or moods, but through simplicity. The bird outside your window, the inhale before sleep, the quiet knowing that rises while you wash your hands, the kind of spiritual insight that needs no substance, because you have become the clear channel, and sometimes that's the whole point. Not to stop using the plant forever, but to remember that you never needed it to begin with. You only needed to feel safe enough to be fully here, fully you. The pause is not absence, it is presence deepened. But if presence is the new home, then what does it mean to live in a world where both fate and choice exist, and to navigate that mystery with clarity? In every spiritual tradition there exists a path not often walked, not because it's hidden, but because it refuses extremes. It doesn't offer rules to follow or freedoms to indulge. It asks for something subtler, something harder. It asks for discernment. This is the middle way, not the space of indecision but the space of integration. It's where surrender and sovereignty shake hands, where intuition meets structure, where the seeker stops chasing highs and starts embodying depth. When it comes to cannabis, most people stand on opposite sides of the river. One side says this plant is sacred. It heals. It expands consciousness. I'll use it often and always. The other says, this plant is a distraction, a trap. I must avoid it entirely. And both may be right, for a time. But the soul is more fluid than dogma. It evolves. It spirals. It outgrows what once felt like home and sometimes returns to it with new eyes. The middle way doesn't ask you to commit to permanence. It asks you to stay awake inside your own experience, to keep asking, is this still true for me? Is this opening me or closing me? This is the kind of maturity that most spiritual systems eventually point toward. Not blind loyalty to a path, but an alive relationship with your own inner compass. That compass will sometimes guide you toward cannabis, sometimes away from it, sometimes into the silence of abstinence, and other times into the sacred smoke of ceremony. There is no contradiction here, only rhythm, only timing, only relationship. To walk this path requires sensitivity, not just to your mind or your mood, but to your energy. You learn to listen to subtle signals, how you feel after a session, what your body tells you before reaching for the plant, how your dreams change, how your presence shifts in daily life. Sovereignty is not control. It's not about never using again. It's about knowing why you use anything, a plant, a practice, a person, a belief, and whether it aligns with your current frequency. And surrender is not submission. It's not about giving up your authority. It's about letting go of rigid self-concepts, letting life guide you beyond what the mind understands. It's sitting with a plant and saying, if this is not for me anymore, I release it with love. The middle way doesn't idolize the tool or demonize it. It honors the seasons. It knows that what once healed you can later dull you. It accepts that clarity sometimes comes in smoke, and sometimes only after it lifts. This path is quiet. It's slow. It's often invisible to others, but it's alive, pulsing beneath your choices, shaping your evolution not through what you consume, but through how honestly you meet yourself. Can you choose cannabis without needing it? Can you let it go without fearing what you'll lose? Can you be fully present for both? That's the work of a soul not seeking shortcuts, but seeking truth. And when you live in that place, not clinging, not resisting, you begin to feel something ancient return to you. Not the rush, not the ritual, but the remembering of who you were before the tools, before the cravings, before the beliefs. Just you, with the breath and the moment and the wisdom to know when to act and when to sit still. And in that stillness, perhaps you begin to hear something, not the plant, not the world, but your own voice, calling you home. For all the plants, prayers, visions, and altered states we may seek, the most sacred portal has always been right here, underneath your skin. Your body is not separate from your spiritual path. It is the path. It is the place where karma unfolds, where emotions root themselves, where intuition rises, and where the divine whispers through tension, pain, pleasure, and breath. Cannabis may help you glimpse the soul, but the body is where the soul lives. This is why, in the deepest spiritual traditions, enlightenment is not about escaping the body. It's about entering it more fully, not flying to other dimensions, but descending into the truth already encoded in your bones, in your gut, in your heart's rhythm, in the sensations you've been taught to numb, because the body doesn't lie. It doesn't manipulate. It doesn't flatter the ego or seduce the mind. It simply reflects your state, exactly as it is. When you tune into it, even for a few minutes a day, you start to notice what no substance could show you. The grief in your hips, the intuition behind your belly's tightening, the joy waiting beneath your shoulders. You realize that every contraction is a story, and every release is a resurrection. And in that listening, cannabis may no longer feel like a necessity, not because it failed you, but because the body started speaking louder. You're not chasing transcendence anymore. You're inhabiting it. Try this. Place one hand over your chest and one over your lower belly. Close your eyes. Breathe deep, not to get somewhere, not to feel something, but to simply be here. Feel the life inside you, the electricity, the quiet pulse. That is not just biology. That is presence. That is consciousness, fully embodied. Your body is the living altar. Your breath is the prayer. Your stillness is the sacrament. And when you begin to trust that, really trust it, something opens. You don't need a plant to feel connected. You don't need stimulation to feel alive. You begin to remember that all of this, the insights, the silence, the sacred, was always inside of you. Cannabis may have helped you remember, but the body is where you embody what you've remembered. And the more you return to that truth again and again, the more you realize there is no higher state than presence. There is no greater teacher than your own nervous system. There is no portal more complete than this body you came here to live in. Maybe the most sacred realization of all is that you were never disconnected to begin with. You were never truly lost, never truly broken, only temporarily distracted from the infinite intelligence that's always lived inside you. Whether through cannabis, silence, movement, fasting, tears, or touch, your soul has always been calling you home, and home is here, in your breath, in your choice, in the way you meet each moment with presence instead of performance. This isn't about choosing for or against the plant. This is about choosing for yourself, again and again, with honesty, reverence, and alignment. The real ceremony is your life. How you wake up, how you speak, how you love, how you listen. That is your sacred smoke. That is your altar. That is the awakening. And maybe, if you've come this far, it's because something deep inside you already knows that your soul doesn't need more stimulation. It needs space to feel, to heal, to remember. So take that space, be with it, honor it, and let it show you who you've been all along. And if this video stirred something in you, if it sparked a memory, a longing, a breath you hadn't taken in a while, then stay a little longer with us. There's another video waiting here on the channel that might meet you right where you are, whether it's about consciousness, healing, energy, or the invisible truths beneath everyday life. You don't have to rush, just choose, with intention. Your next step might be one click away, or one breath deeper into the silence. Either way, we'll be right here, walking with you.